All right. Welcome back to another edition of the Agriculture Podcast. We're still here at the Kentucky Farm Show, the National Farm Machinery Show. And today we're here with a couple of the, I guess, the long-term stalwarts of the pool. And I'm going to let Brandon introduce them. He's good friends with them and has known them a lot longer than me. So here's Brandon.
So we got a real treat this week. Being it's Farm Show Week, you can't talk about the National Farm Machinery Show without including the Championship Tractor Pull. It's a nightly event that's encompassed with the Farm Show. So every evening at 7 o'clock, Farm Show takes off inside Freedom Hall. It's one of the largest and probably from our perspective, we're partial, but the best indoor pools in the world. It's extremely prestigious event. Carries a lot of weight and a lot of history. Neil and I, being from Kentucky, maybe more so, a little more than me than Neil. It's an extremely we refer to it as a hallowed ground in tractor pulling, and there's been a lot of mega tractor pulling stars of our sport that have graced this arena to compete at this event. So we couldn't really be here this week without paying some homage to a motorsport that's associated with this massive event for agriculture this week and for sure in the state of Kentucky. So today we included two of the voices of this event. If you live stream this event, or if you're in attendance here, you'll pick their voices out. Both of them are extremely good friends of mine. Miles and I have been together for a long time. This is I think my 19th or 20th trip to this place. So we'll let them introduce themselves. We're joined today by Dan Mayer and Miles Kreiger, two of the voices of the farm show, like I said, and the history that they have in this sport and the lineage that they carry on to keep these shows across the country during the summer, but for sure this event keep it on the tracks it needs to go to be informative and entertaining and engaging. They're two of the best that I know, and we're happy to have them with them today. So, Dan, introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. My name is Dan Mayer. I'm originally from Western New York, just outside of Buffalo, about 30 miles east of Buffalo, and about 2 years ago moved down here to southern Indiana. I live just across the river in Floyd's Knobs, Indiana now, and my tractor pulling, I mean, I've kind of been, involved, or not involved, I should say, just watched tractor pulling since I was about, let's see, about 7 years old. I saw my first tractor pull, which back then was indoors, another indoor pull. Back then in the early 80s, indoor pulling was very popular. And most of the organizations would go to the big cities. And I was about half hour, 45 minutes from Niagara Falls, and that's where they actually pulled up there. And so that was my first tractor pull I went to was 1982, and I was hooked. It was just a lot of the crew you see out here today. Dan Christiani built the track. I mean, it was just a lot of the same guys that you see out there were up there back then, so they've still been involved with it. So it's kind of neat. And but yeah, my also other interest was stock car racing, dirt racing, and that's kind of the path I took. I mean, I always go to the tractor pulls. They come and we travel out to Syracuse, New York. We travel into Canada. We went to quite a few pulls. My dad, my uncle, and just one of those things. We just go here or there, and but also I had an uncle that raced cars, so it was kind of one of those things where go to the races, so always motorsports, so when I became old enough, I actually started racing dirt cars, but always went to the tractor pull still. And I should rewind a little bit. My first time here in Louisville came down with my dad in 1988, and that was we saw it on ESPN, and saw an advertisement, hey, this pull, and we looked it up, and we came down here on a Friday afternoon and went to the National Farm Machinery Show for the first time. And we didn't come every year after that. We just every couple of years or whatever. So that was the farm show side of things. And then once I became old enough, I actually started racing dirt cars and did that for about 5 years. I think I did that. And at the same time, I got married in there, and we had our first son. And kind of realized that the racing part of it took too much time, and I've got a 2-year-old sitting at my back door watching me work on a race car. So it's like, okay, well, I can do this later on in life. So sold a race car and didn't really do much of anything that next year. And my wife's like, "You got to get another hobby. You're driving me crazy." So we had back in Western New York, we had a local organization that was affiliated with the Pro Pulling League. Actually, when I got involved with them, they were just transitioning from ATPA over to the PPL. But there was an announcer, he was just terrible in Western New York. So I went to one of the meetings and I told the president at the time, I says, hey, I'd like to do this. I think I can do a better job than this. This guy's not, he's telling bad jokes, and it was terrible. So I told the president at the time, which was Henry Everman, and I says, Henry, I think I can do this. I mean, here I am coming off the street, just coming in saying, I think I can do better than this guy. And he's like, you know what? He says, we'll give you a try. So kind of went that first year. That would have been 2006. And that was my first year announcing, and just kind of went to all the polls, and it started to kind of shift the other way. And the guy that was there, the longtime guy, things started to get a little edgy because people started to comment and like, hey, why don't we this, that, and so eventually became and then actually 2006 was the first year that I met this gentleman. We were we had a pull up in Fergus, Ontario, and our local group, the Empire State Pullers, were asked to come up and pull at this event. And Miles was on the other part of it. He came with like the touring group that was at USA East, yeah, USA, right, USA Pulling, and met Miles there, and first time that we worked together up there.
They've come a long way.
Yeah. So 2006, and then just kind of here and there, just did all the local polls, and then there's two in New York State. There's two organizations. Pretty much they use the Syracuse in the middle of the state as kind of like the dividing line, and so there's the Eastern New York and Western New York, and then soon after couple years, Eastern New York started asking if I'd come do some of their events, and then down in Pennsylvania there was a couple groups, so it was people started asking and doing more and more events, and then then I want to say it was about late 2000s, like 09, 010, I met Johnny Christie, and John had asked me if we used to have the Champions Tour pull in Hamburg, and he asked if I would announce that. I'm like, absolutely. I've been there since, used to go every year. So it was kind of one of those things. It was a big moment. And actually I worked with Leslie the first time, Leslie Mears, who's one of our co-announcers here at the Tractor Pull. And I was more or less the local announcer. And Leslie's like, hey, why don't you come on up and, we'll, work together kind of thing, and just kind of took off from there. And John asked me to do more events, and we went out to Arizona. We've been out to I don't know how many different states over the years, and then other events. You get somebody from other events would call, and eventually you're doing here. You're going to North Carolina. You're going. Pretty much. I don't know how many. Yeah, I don't know how many actual. Have you ever figured out how many states you've been in?
Yeah, I have a Google map of all the places I've been at.
That's neat.
I should do that one time. Just kind of figuring out where.
Yeah.
Like, but and then eventually, this pull, that pull, and then got asked to do the pull in Bowling Green, Ohio, and I've done some really big pulls, and then but. My trip out to, let me rewind a little bit, but my trip out to Arizona in 2014 was the first time that I actually we kind of all stayed together in hotels down in Arizona with Dan Christiani, Mike Witt, and Justin Atchison. And Justin was actually my roommate. So we that weekend, we just kind of all hung out and got to know them guys pretty good. And by the end of the weekend, Dan Christiani had asked me, he said, "Hey, would you be interested in announcing at the farm show?" And I was like, oh, you know, I'm like, say no, you know. So it was one of those where, yeah, I'd be interested, you know. So okay, but you know, never really heard much. Year or two, well, it was about a year and a half later. I was here at the farm show, and Justin Atchison he'd get a hold of me about 2 weeks before, and he would say, "Hey, are you coming out to the farm show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there." "Okay, all right." Well, little did I know I was the backup guy, but nobody ever told me. So this went on for a couple of years, and I was actually just sitting in the crowd. But if Butch or Dave or somebody, you know, there was only the two of them. So if one of them went down, I was like the backup guy. So then finally, after a couple of years, they had asked if 2018, the 50th anniversary, if I would come on, and you know, absolutely. And been here ever since. So 2018 was the first year that I announced here at the championship tractor pull.
Cool deal. Well, Mr. Kreiger, you have a long history in this building. Go along with a lot of us that's grown up in it. Let's hear your background.
Well, it all started with my dad. I mean, obviously, my dad was a touring announcer for a little over 40 years. He was the voice of the championship tractor pull here for over 40 years as well. And so I grew up just across the river in southern Indiana where Dan lives now. And so for me, I was 15 minutes, 20 minutes from home, and so this was my home pull. And I did travel with my dad a lot, so I will tell you that we put a lot of miles on cars, and it was very rare for me to say that I was at a hometown pull, because outside of this pull, the closest pull we would go to on the circuit was usually in Owensboro, Kentucky. So most of the time this was my hometown pull, and I just thought it was awesome that, you know, around the holiday season we would always start to kind of build some enthusiasm and discussion about what was coming. And I never got to miss school per se, but I was here every night, and usually would just be tired at school and see all my friends and enjoy kind of this week here in Louisville. But my dad was hired by TNT Motorsports in the mid 80s. He was an announcer, and actually he really started sitting on a fire truck in Greenville, Indiana, in my hometown. So the local fire department put on a tractor pull every year. In Thunder Valley is what the name of the facility was there. Just a beautiful little park in Greenville, Indiana, that had a track built down right on the side of a creek bed. And they would put a pull on, and the sort of rumble and rattle of the pulling the vehicles going down the track became known as Thunder Valley. And that kind of started. My dad, being the volunteer fireman, needed a task, and they asked if he would be willing to announce the tractor pull. So he did. And a gentleman named Billy Joe Miles was at that event and heard him. And Tom Carter was with Billy Joe Miles that particular night. They were some guys who were part of the original forming committee and formative board of the TNT Motorsports era that really ultimately made truck and tractor pulling kind of a household name, in my opinion, especially from the indoor side of things. So Dad went on and hit the tour and traveled all over the country, and TNT decided to do some things in addition to pulling to try to make the show better. They started the introduction of monster trucks, and my dad did a lot of monster truck involvement as well. So the very first time monster trucks were on ESPN in Fisherville, Virginia in 1988, Dad was the analyst for the television, and he toured with TNN and did a bunch of the Nashville Network coverage with Steve Evans and some of those guys over the years. And but he really didn't like the television production as much as he preferred live announcing. So I traveled with him to events all over the country, and he developed a thyroid disorder when I was a younger teenage boy, and my mom had two other children obviously with her, so my brother and sister were both like high schoolers, and my dad and I would just pack up and leave and be gone, for a lot of events over the summer. And my siblings would stay home, and my mom would run them to all their things, and my dad and I'd be on the road. But when my dad developed his thyroid disorder, he'd fall asleep at the wheel a lot. And so because of that, we kind of had a family rule. There'd always be somebody that was with him, and that was most always typically me. And we would run all around the country. In 2003, I got my chance to do my first ever announcing, and that was kind of, I guess I should say, in 2002, I announced an event with my brother and I, just together in Salem, Illinois. It was an ATPA Grand American event. In 2003, my brother and myself and my dad I got to announce at 2 events together that year. We got to announce at Henry, Illinois, Marshall-Putnam County Fair, which was an ATPA event. And then we also got to do an event in Brandenburg, Kentucky, which was also kind of like a hometown event, just about 25 minutes from home. So that's sort of where it all really kind of began. And I was blessed to get to work with the ATPA, and Jonathan and Christy and Mike Chastain sort of opened some doors for me and got me going a little bit. But it wasn't until I really became close with John Moomaw and Jim Austin and some of the guys from the ITPA and Clint Tucker, who has What Smokin' Promotions, that really my doors started to really open more and more. I announced a lot of ITPA events, and in 2006 I got hooked up with the defunct ATPA that became USA Pulling. And that particular year, they did not have enough time to really put together a schedule or sanction any events. So they put together a purse fund and co-sanctioned events with the Outlaws and with the ITPA. And USA had about 14 hooks that year, primarily with the Outlaws or with the ITPA. We did 2 big ITPA events as well as the Illinois State Fair, so there were 3 hooks that you could get points with the ITPA. And then we went to Richland, Missouri, and we went to Diamond, Missouri. We went to Wisner, Nebraska. We went to Whitewright, Texas. Fergus, Ontario, where Dan and I met in '06, and a couple other events kind of along the way. The Missouri State Fair were all kind of points events that were built into this additional co-sanction. So essentially, the USA Pulling just threw money at the purse for these select events, and that's kind of where some doors really opened for me. So in 2006 and 2007, I toured with the Outlaws, and I got to do maybe a dozen events in 2007 for Doug Roberts, and I got to meet and work with Dave Bennett, a former voice here, with my dad, which was a really neat experience. I got to learn kind of what I would categorize as the way of the world on the other side of the river. And it's really kind of crazy. There's such a difference in kind of how things flow and general announcing and what the expectation might be east of the Mississippi River. And Dave was a phenomenal announcer. His knowledge of the equipment is second to none, but his ability to work a crowd was absolutely something I had never witnessed before. And his ability to tell a joke and lead the crowd into, this hilarious moment was something I had never witnessed before either. I just didn't ever catch any of that kind of stuff happening at an NTPA event or a PPL event. So I learned a lot from those years. And then in 2008, I started to do a few more PPL events, and that kind of led to where in 2012 I was absolutely going as busy as you could imagine. Probably more than you would think. I did approximately 42 hooks that year. Flew to 10 different states, or drove to 10 different states that year. So they had an event that year in Kilgore, Texas, and I got to go down there. Went to Concord, North Carolina, and to Saluda, South Carolina. A couple events in central area, obviously here as well. And then I also was hooked up to do some NTPA events every now and again as well. So those were great experiences, and then from there it just kind of started to broaden. I started my website, which is Miles Beyond 300, and that kind of created what became the Road Show. And the Road Show was sort of this idea of like college game day. I wanted to have an opportunity for fans to get to interact with pullers and to make pullers the stars of the sport more of a household name. I wanted people to know who Brandon Hunt was, see his face, and be able to associate with who he was. And so I started that, and that kind of opened up some more doors for me. I got to go do the road show in Toma, Wisconsin, and while I was there, similar to Dan kind of being the backup, I had no idea that I was there to be auditioned as well. So I went up and hosted the road show, and then they walked over to me at the end of my road show on Saturday night and said, "Hey, we know you really like the two-wheel drive class. We'd love to hear you go take the mic and do the two-wheel drive class." Well, I wasn't expecting to be sitting in the Kenny Mack Tower replacing Kenny Mack.
It's iconic for people that don't understand. It's an iconic announcing name in Toma, Wisconsin.
Yeah, the Tower.
He was the voice of Toma,
and
Wisconsin.
He set bar there, an unprecedented kind of idea there, and his knowledge and love. He toured with the NTPA Region 3 primarily, and 5, some up through Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and such a distinct voice. So I got to sit with Kenny and The next year, I was asked to go back as a full-time announcer, and so I learned a lot from Kenny Mack and got to sit with him, and I did a pre-show interview with him each session, which was pretty awesome. But that was in 2014. I got to do that, and I went to Chapel Hill in 2015 and Bowling Green in 2015 as official on-contract announcer. So yeah, it's been pretty remarkable to lead me to where I have and kind of have the events that I have, and then to get here and be one of the voices of the championship tractor pull. They had an application process, which was something that was quite unique. I don't think it ever really happened previously, and to be one of maybe 10.
I don't know. I was going to ask you, how many did they actually apply
I
or
don't
reach
know what
out
the
to?
exact answer is there, but they interviewed 5 of us, and Leslie and I were 2 of the 5 that were interviewed for the spots here, and she and I were both selected. And I think our addition in the 54 years here, there's still less than maybe a dozen.
Yeah, I was going to say we're right around 12 or 13. I wanted to say that.
She and I we kind of put us right to about a dozen. So I can go back to, I can keep counting back a few years. I'm most obviously familiar with Dad and Harold's partnership,
Right.
And Scott Douglas and Dad's partnership.
Yeah.
For a little while in there, there was a local guy who was the voice of the Louisville Motor Speedway, Keith Scott.
Yeah, Frank Scott.
Or Frank Scott,
I think
and
was his
Frank
name.
was in that group, obviously, and
Before
then
Harold.
he would have been before Harold. Harold came in. Douglas was before Frank, and then after Harold departed, Dave came in, and then sort of Dan was added into that sort of tripod there, and we've stayed with the tripod since. But to be one of 12, maybe 13 voices in the history of the 54 years of this very championship poll, it's pretty remarkable, and it's not something that I take lightly. It's not something that he takes lightly. It's certainly not something that Leslie takes lightly, and we have a job. We have a real true task, and I think the thing I would say is different here than most of the events that we may get to do is the knowledge of the crowd here is very, very high. They are the diehard or diehard fan. There are people that are here that are on an all expenses paid business trip. I'm not naive to think that the executives of some of these companies aren't entertaining while we're here, but a good chunk of the people sitting in these stands
Pulling fans.
are fans.
For sure. Like I was just moving through the crowd last night, and if you notice they've got the expo that just shows all the tractors and the names and the states that they're in, and they can write distances. And I noticed that a big portion of the people were keeping up with each distance. So they really do have a love for the sport and are very much involved with watching the tractors go and knowing who's winning that class, which is I thought it was really neat to see.
The fan base in general and pulling, and I think Dan probably can speak to this too, we have reached a level where we're not really at the county fair level anymore.
No, we're not.
And because of this level of where we're at, the professionalism, the degree of expectation of the announcer and of the production as a whole, I mean, just the entire show production, it no longer exists anymore. The cool thing is I think he and I get to also experience state level pulling is no longer considered a county fair level pull anymore either. It has advanced to where the feeder systems of what you're experiencing in the game today. We have people who are state level pullers that punched tickets to the finals last night.
That's right.
In multiple classes. Now, don't get me wrong, we have national level pullers who punch tickets to the finals as well, but we have state level pullers.
We also had national pullers that are not going to the finals last
Yes, because guys who
Very,
might be
very
categorized-
good national pullers that did not make the finals last night.
Yes, because guys who might have been the favorite or considered, hey, they're going to be in, might have a larger budget or whatever you want to say, I think that's the beauty of this sport. Is you might say the stars have to align, but that's probably not a fair statement. There are so many factors and so many elements that make a bull successful. And whether it's the whole shot or the setup or the chassis tweaks that you put in your system or the horsepower that you've got or whatever it be, there are a lot of elements that make a big change. And so last night, I mean, I would be lying to tell you if I didn't think that the fact that Russell Hildenbrand punched a ticket to the finals was not, I mean, like, it's going to take a pretty remarkable thing over the course of these next 4 sessions
to
top my feeling that I left with last night, to know that he and Debbie made it. Like that's awesome. You know, or for Mickey Shorter in that pro stock class to just miss with a brand new complete rebuild of a tractor. And that's just something that's become he and Linda's love is built around that tractor and their time in that barn and working in that shop and the people that they're working with. And so just some pretty awesome feats to think about from this sport, and the uniquenesses of the people in this sport are what make it thrive.
Now, just going back, just to rewind a little bit, you know, Miles mentioned about the crowd here in Louisville. You know, they've been there, they've seen everything, but you've also got that fine line of folks that have never been to a pull. So it's, how do you balance that? You know, what you don't want to overdo it with the, hey, what's going on here, but you don't want to leave those folks out.
Sure.
So that's the part that you deal with, is like, okay, how much do we go down this road, or how much, you know, do we just go, you know? So it's kind of.
We had that last night. I mean, I'm a tractor pulling regular. Neil's not really a tractor pulling regular, for sure at this level.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, over the course of I probably started coming here around 1990, and, like, I don't come every year, but I used to have a really good friend on the fair board, so, or his dad was, and I would come up here with him, and I would get to watch the pools, and really in my geography of Kentucky, there's just not there's one, I think, tractor pull in my county, but it's just the local guys, you know. So I, you know, just to get to experience this is usually once a year or once every 2 or 3 years for me. So
And how much it's changed from the last time you watched the bull like we did last night.
oh, for sure, just in a couple of years, you know, the advancement of it is amazing to me.
I think we've been on a really rapid road of advancements in tractor pulling.
Well, we touched on that yesterday at the road show. Miles had asked, what do you think the biggest advancement in the sport has been the last couple of years? You know, and mentioned about the tires. You know, the tires have come a long way. But even, you know, the first year that I was here at the championship tractor pull, you had tractors that were making 1,500 horsepower are now making 3,000 horsepower. Mm-hmm. 30 years later, you know, it's amazing and it just keeps on going.
Yeah, Brandon was talking about the horsepower yesterday, and I had no idea. You know, like, it blew my mind when he started talking about how high horsepower, and then show me the motor running, you know, and it's incredible to see the innovation and power in those things.
You know, the engineering part of it, you know, how do you get 4 engines to work together? I mean, nowhere else can you see that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the one thing about tractor and truck pulling, that it's like, you got to be able to grasp that and take that somewhere, you know, take it bigger. Because it's like, you walk through Rod Brand Arena, you're not going to see that anywhere else.
No.
You know, I mean, you go to a drag race, okay, there's top fuel cars, funny cars, you know.
It's one of their motors.
Yeah, they're
and
awesome.
one drive shaft.
Yeah.
There's tractors in Broadbent that have 4 of those motors that go on a top fuel dragster equivalent, and they're running them in tandem.
And you've got a guy sitting up on top.
100%.
You know what I mean? So it's like, kind of like a funny car, you're up on top of it, but you've got 4 of them in front of you, 3 of them in front of you, you know, and that part of it is the marvel. You know, it's like, man, how did, you know, and I could imagine, like, the tractors that are sitting over in Broadbent, how many people walk through and, you know, how many times have they been asked that question? But that's, you know, the kind of things that, you know, people want to hear.
Right.
People want to know, you know, I mean, you've never seen that before. You're going to, you know, you're going to ask that question. So, you know, and then you move on into the diesel classes. You know, you look around and, you know, the novice person, you look around and all the diesel tractors pretty much, unless they got the bigger tires, they all look the same, but they're all uniquely different, you know, so that's our job to inform everybody, but you don't want to overdo it, you know. So it's kind of that, like I said, that fine line of too much or too little, you know. So that's what we deal with.
Speak a little bit about the art and the approach you guys take. Like last night was the first night of the pool for the week, and the intensity in this place just builds as you get towards Saturday night. And it's just a steady It's like you're on an escalator and it's revving up. Talk a little bit about how you take a night one last night that can or cannot be the most electrifying. It's usually the first night, and it's got some hiccups or that it has the the rev meter hasn't peaked yet. Versus how you approach a night like last night, and then how you pace yourself to get to Saturday night. Because Kreiger, Dan too, I've heard you both in this place lose your voice.
It's going to happen.
So how do you pace yourself to tell the story? Because you're telling the story while competitors like myself, we got our helmet on, we're not talking. Our tractors are talking. But we're not talking. You're telling our story and engaging that crowd, and how you pace yourself from a Wednesday night show to where we are revved out and potentially sold out Friday night, Saturday night shows in this arena, and how that changes your approach through the week, and how you feed off of it when you're on the dirt. Because I can speak from playing experience. There is nothing like standing on that start line Saturday night. I think about it because I saw it last weekend in the Super Bowl. This place will bring a tear to your eye during opening ceremonies. No different than a football player standing on the line of the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So you have to try to keep your emotions in check a little bit, and it sometimes it affects me how I'll go and approach the pool that night. So speak a little bit about that, because you guys are doing what you do, and it's different from what we do as tractor pullers, but at the same time we're doing the same things, just a little different.
Well, I'll go first, and you can build off of it. How's that sound?
Okay, that'll work.
I will bet the farm on the fact that I lose my voice.
I'm going with you. I know you.
So I hate that, and I'll be honest with you. The timing of the indoor event, the weather, and the combination of the air inside this building, and the fact that I have not had any time at all to train my voice. By outdoor season, when we're on the road, you're ready. And I won't lose
You're
my
calloused up and ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
You can pull through Bowling Green.
Yes, exactly.
Which is louder and quote unquote bigger.
Yeah.
But I know you struggle here, and I always think it's probably a little bit of the fuel fumes too. You're sucking in fuel
I think
fumes.
atmospheric conditions absolutely affect us. And we're really going to experience it, because when we need to have the most true part of our voice on Saturday, it's going to be 40 degrees cooler than it is today here.
Right.
And we're going to have the cool air coming in every time they lift that door.
Right.
I didn't notice an air change at all in that building last night.
I didn't either.
No.
And it was pretty remarkable, because I think the air temperatures were pretty similar. But let me tell you, that is something that I have struggled with tremendously. And I will not say that with my voice per se, but with my energy. Because here's what happens. Everybody that has qualified to be here deserves the same experience. And I want to have the same energy for you in a preliminary on Wednesday as I do for somebody on Saturday. Because even though they don't make it on Saturday, they made it here, and they deserve to have my energy.
Right.
So it is very difficult, because I could very easily, and Dan or Leslie could very easily just stand out there and say, here comes Brandon. He's a nice dude.
Right.
But that doesn't truly effectively give you the respect that you deserve for making it to this event. So as you develop and as you get through this season here at Freedom Hall in the Championship Tractor Pull, we need to be on Saturday night. I have no problem in admitting that by the time that I get to Saturday night, I am physically and mentally fatigued. Like, it is very, very challenging. I do not know how Dave, my dad, Harold, Scott made it look so easy.
Boy, they did.
It is not. I mean, I will tell you that after my first year here, my respect and true respect for them tripled, because it is just a totally different deal. Last year on Friday night, I was asked to do the opening ceremonies. It was the first time I did opening ceremonies without my dad. I cried through the whole thing. I was shaking, and he can vouch for the fact that I literally couldn't hardly even hold the microphone because my emotions had just gotten me. And after we fired the first tractor up, and as we got going, like it was like, okay, I'm fine.
I know how you
But
feel.
the opening ceremonies moments of those, like the Lee Greenwood song, the cool elements of what this has brought over the years, like even last night, the Pledge of Allegiance is something that I just think it's awesome that we get to do that. From the perspective of qualifying, the perspective of being here, the perspective of building intensity from the start to the finish, I haven't figured that all out just yet. I'm not going to lie to you. I want to be on Saturday night. Some of it is my own issue. I love you, but I should have told you no to this podcast.
Right.
Because the last thing in the world that I need to do
Talking
is
more?
talk for another hour. When I already have to go host another road show here in an hour,
Right.
and my full day is consisting of me talking. But last year we did the wave on Saturday night.
Took
He,
you out.
he and I both knew we were almost in the tank, but we wanted to honor my dad, and we wanted to honor Harold, who we both lost in a 8-month period of time.
Yep.
And I will tell you that as much as I want to do that again,
Probably not happening.
we're not going to do the wave on Saturday night unless somebody tells me we have to.
So just to clarify, I don't know if you remember, growing up, I remember. So I'm 30, I'll be 39 this year, and I think I've missed maybe 3 farm show tractor pulls in my life. The Harold and Butch Wave was a yearly.
It was.
It was all.
It's
it was a yearly event. It was gonna happen, and nobody ever did it, in my opinion. Did it like them? Not even you guys. I'm partial, and I know y'all are too, right?
I'm not offended by
I miss.
that.
Yeah,
I miss
I'm
the
not-
hell.
I'd say I'm-
I miss Butch Kreiger.
Yes.
It was one of my most vivid memories as a young man coming here was the waves that were in the
Waves
yeah.
And the Budweiser Fro.
Yeah.
You can never get rid of those parts of what they meant to the tractor. So I get it. So it was pretty cool to have the wave back last year in Freedom Hall. But I know it about took you out, both of you.
It did. It took me out. First time at a tractor pull I've ever lost my voice was last year. And you talk about that this year. I mean, I bought one of them Navage machines. I've been gargling salt water. I mean,
I went to
I'm
the
just-
doctor and got a
I'm just
steroid pack and
trying
trying to do what I can to help increase my durability. My dad used to always subscribe to this idea that he needed to have what he referred to as his smoothie,
Oh,
and it was a shot. He would always go to his doctor about 7 days out, and he would get like a steroid antibiotic shot that he would take the week before here to try to make sure it built his immunity up and try to give him a little bit of durability to the voice. I eat a whole lot of cough drops and try to drink a lot of water, but I'm just going to tell you that by Saturday afternoon I'm going to be on ice, and by Saturday night halfway through we'll be raspy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it because if I make it back to Saturday night, my motor is probably going to be as tired as your voice.
So
That's the way it is here in Louisville.
yeah.
You don't come here to run. You don't
That's
come here
right.
to run without running it to run it.
Yeah.
No, you're here to win.
You want to win.
Yep.
And you got to make it out of the prelim into the final before you can win it on Saturday night. So it's I told Steve Bollinger last night. I'm like, look, you've made it from A to B, and you've checked that first check mark off. You're parked in Broadbent again, and you're going to run on Saturday night, and that's the first step.
Now going back to the crowd Miles was talking about, you kind of feed off of the energy. So you start working the crowd a little bit. You can kind of tell, okay, hey, this crowd's just they're not into it like say last night, or you can kind of just get that vibe as you move out and through on the night. I mean, it depends what class is running or whatever. So that's kind of you kind of read them. That's the way that I kind of go about it as far as how the crowd is responding. I mean, your normal pitch and everything else is the same, but it's just as far as getting the crowd involved and seeing if they're really with it or not.
Sure.
You just kind of work off of that.
We're pretty lucky that Saturday night crowds in Bowling Green and Louisville are
I'm
electric.
talking about it.
Yes.
Bowling Green, this place is no different. You don't always know. I mean, if you had a good pass, right? If I'm driving, I know if my tractor ain't good. I may not have known how far I went, but they dang sure let you know if you went far enough. You will know. Helmet on.
Well, that's what my question to you was. You can hear that in your helmet.
Oh, absolutely.
When they
I
start,
went out there at Bowling Green this year on Saturday night, and it was just, I mean, they were coming in the roll cage. Front there, I was moving. It was a good pass. And they were coming in my helmet, just like I had a speaker in my ear.
Yeah, because it was so
It
loud.
just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It never gets old.
I thought
Is it really the only reason, or I shouldn't say the only reason, but it's one of the biggest reasons that my adrenaline revs is how they react.
I thought it was neat last night. Like you have the powerful, like when the tractors pull in here and they're tuning their motors up, getting ready for the pull, and you can feel the power in the motor throughout the building. And then as soon as they shut down here on the end, the crowd is so loud. It maybe doesn't quite equal the power of the tractor, but it's pretty close, I think that's super
It's an
neat.
impressive place. I mean, I think this is. I know I put a lot of pressure on myself coming in here this week. It's like I said in the opening mantra. It's a hollow ground place for tractor pulling competition. It's a short track. It's indoors. Everybody's around you. It's kind of like the Bristol of tractor pulling, I think. But man, it's the Super Bowl. This is it.
Right, and add to that, this is the biggest city that hosts a tractor. If you look around, all the tractor pulls, throughout the summer, we're in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is outside of Toledo, but not in downtown. I mean, this is literally downtown.
Downtown, yeah.
This is the biggest city where you live, But
Yeah.
Over 1 million people.
Yeah, humongous city.
You know what I mean? So it's like this is the biggest stage, and the pullers. I mean, like you just talked about, you know that when you come down that tunnel, man, this is it. This is the
It's one of the
big
most
stage.
surreal feelings when you come down that tunnel. It's unbelievable.
Just being here, like in the last day or two, and just walking through the crowds, it's unbelievable how many people are interested in. I mean, well, you can walk down in Broadbent where all the tractors are, and like you can barely get through there. And then to walk through the West Wing or one of the other wings, it's shoulder to shoulder. So the great energy here, and just the amount of people that come to this thing from the ag world and outside the ag world is, it's a great thing for our state, and just it's great for the city of Louisville as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, myself as an announcer, I make sure I walk down the tunnel every time that I walk into Freedom Hall, just to get yourself. Hey, this is you got to pinch yourself.
Yeah.
And that does it right there. It's like, hey, I'm walking down the tunnel into Freedom Hall. 30 years ago, I was sitting in those stands, and I never would have thought in a million years.
I dreamed about making that walk.
Yeah, it's.
I dreamed about it too, a lot. I dreamed about putting it in the sand pile a lot. I don't know how many times I carpeted it into the sand piles. I don't know how many. I don't know where this thing goes, this sport goes, or this event goes as generations become younger, right? I'm still one of the youngest in my class. But the surrealness of this place is just something that's hard to put into words, and I don't know that we can even do it justice on this podcast. But it's a really big week, and couldn't help but try to bring some insight into it. And as important as the competitors are, you two guys along with Leslie are extremely important in keeping this event as it goes and moving through the night, and hopefully showed a little insight into what goes into it. It's not just you standing down there on the dirt with a microphone. It's way more. The approach is on point on purpose, and it's no different than me going and tuning my motor to try to get down the track the best. You gotta have your approaches to keep that event moving through the whole night and keep the engagement and kind of. I mean, you're the lead. All you guys are the leaders of that show, regardless if even though you're not driving a vehicle. So.
Which I was going to say we got about a month. You guys are working on getting your tractors ready. We're about a month out. We're getting things prepared. Where no other pull you put this kind of effort into, because you're dealing with so many vehicles, and it's a personal stage. Where single track, like we're in Bowling Green, you got this, that, you got this track running, this track running. You really don't have time to spend on the pullers like we do here in Louisville. So that's another thing, that it's just the preparation part of it.
Well, we're spoiled too, because he and I travel on the national circuits a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So we kind of know who's going to be there.
You're the. I know you're going to hate this, but you probably hear it. Y'all are the Harold and Butch, and I don't know who is Harold and who's Butch, but the tandemism of what they brought to the sport, you guys also possess.
What did Greg Whitaker call us?
Butch and Daryl.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Say Whitaker had an innate.
That's right.
for us.
And it's true. It's true. I mean, for sure. We all grew up watching Butch and Harold.
Absolutely icons. Yep.
Crystal ran across a picture one out, and she sent it to you. the first night I won in here, he did my. I mean, it was a big thing. Butch always interviewed the top three. So the top three, for people that are listening and don't understand how this event works, you place in the top three, and they do a winner circle event on the track. And Butch always interviewed the top three. So it is a puller's dream to make that top three to get to talk to Butch in that winner circle. So I mean, the night I talked to him, I can remember vividly most of it. And Case did a good job of reminding me of it because he'll pull the DVDs out and play them over the years.
Yeah.
But probably one of the coolest moments of my pulling career.
Yeah. Well,
That and Bowling Green are right there.
with there being, there's 48 vehicles per session, and what's different for us here than anywhere else is we don't get to see them all.
Mm-hmm.
But when we go to a PPL event, or we go to an NTPA Grand National event, it's a very rare moment for us to not see them all,
Right.
know them all,
Right.
have something to say about them, even without really being prepared for them.
Right.
And if we find a vehicle that we don't know, it's pretty easy to make it to one or two or three in the pit area and pose a question of what do you do, where are you from, how'd you get here, type of thing. But I'm not going to lie to you, out of the 190 some odd entries here, there's probably 40%
That you don't ever call.
that I have not announced in the last couple of years. And I need to know about them because, just like I told you, they deserve the same amount of recognition and experience for being here
Absolutely.
as you being one of my dearest friends does.
Right.
And while it's easy for me to be biased and say I know everything about you and I know what you're doing and I can talk about your tractor, they deserve that exact same 30 seconds of love. And so because of that, he and I are buried in the internet. I don't know how in the world we'd have done it without the World Wide Web, to be
You ain't
honest.
kidding.
Yes, right.
To truly
There's
be
so
fair
many
to 'em.
organizations.
But I also
You
think
know.
it's commendable that you guys have as much passion for that guy you don't know as the people you do know. And I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from either one of you. But the amount of dedication and attention you throw in can't be covered up by a 4-engine model. So that was kind of what I wanted to do today. Sit down and visit, and we'll let you save your voices here as we wrap up. But you guys are two of my dear friends, and I love what you do, and I'm thankful for what you do for our sport, and each of your own right and what you bring to it. And Mutch and Daryl. Mutch and Daryl tag teams, but I'm partial, I'm biased. I don't mind calling this one of my favorite ones on the circuit. And I'm thankful y'all are here and bringing this event forward as we move on to the next generations that are going to come in this place. So, thanks for taking time to sit down with us. And, appreciate what you do.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
appreciate it. And we've got to get homage to the guys that started this in
Absolutely.
1969.
Gang of
The Owensboro gang.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for them guys, we
wouldn't be
sitting
here.
And they, persevered and, Butch. I mean, all them folks. Just over the years, it's like if they didn't, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing this event does bring is the weight of the history.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I kind of take a personal responsibility. It's our job not to mess it up, right? I think that's one thing that the weight brings to you. I don't know how many people feel that way, but I know I do. It's an important thing for agriculture, for our industry. It's an important thing. It's an important thing for our motorsport, and it's an extremely important thing for our state.
Yeah. Huge for our state. And I'd just like to say one thing before we get off here. Like, over my life, like, there are certain voices that you hear that you never forget, and part of these events are you come to these events and then you hear those voices and you recognize usually after just a few minutes, once you hear somebody's voice, especially if it's like rich and deep and like you guys, it just makes the event you're watching so special, So we appreciate you guys being on here and your time that you put in for our state and for our industry.
Sure.
So, you got anything else you want to add?
I think it's time for us to roll on to the next one.
All right. Well, we appreciate your guys' time. Thanks for joining us. Yep. Thanks for listening to the Agriculture Podcast, and like, share, and subscribe.
We'll see you next time.